Hello and welcome to another fantastic episode of Victory Never Sleeps. Once again, I am guest hosting for the Helgakviða as he and his family are in Florida, spending time with some of their family. And we're going to run through the Helgakviða Hundingsbana I. It is 37 stanzas, I think, something like that. So shorter by a bit than the last portion. Top of the show stuff. I'm still learning all this. Bear with me. You can listen to this live on YouTube, Twitch, I think, Odyssey, Twitter, X, whichever you prefer, Rumble, VK. Links from the description of the video, or easy to find if you just search for us on those platforms. The biggest upcoming event starts as early as tomorrow if you show up, I suppose. But Friday, White Springs, Florida, in Jordshof, we are celebrating Charming of the Plow. My wife and I will be there. The Helgakviða will be there. Erickson's, the McNallans, the law speaker, some of our Odenshof folk. A bunch of great people will be there. It's not too late to get tickets. We made sure to buy enough food to prepare for more people than we were certain will show up. So if you need to, pay to register when you show up, that works just fine. Just let us know. And feel free to bring an auction item and things to donate, whatever you'd like. And we will see you there, hopefully. And a month from this Friday, March 21st, we have Ostara at Thorshof, which will be at Witan Svan's Hof. He and Witan Young and the team there put on a great event. That's as Gothi East of Jordshof, Charming the Plow is my favorite event, but as Trent, the member, Ostara at Thorshof is my favorite event because that's kind of where I started out Hof-wise, and that was it used to be the kind of flagship event on the East Coast in general before we had Hofs. So that one's near and dear to my heart. It's a great time. We will probably be there, depending on what the baby doctor says here in a couple weeks. Most likely we'll be there. Witan Svan, you got any top of the show stuff?
Oh, well, I was going to say, definitely, Charming of the Plow for you guys in Florida. That's really, really good. We just had ours. Most people, I don't think they know, every Hof has their Holy Tide on the third weekend, but every national event is on the fourth weekend of the month. So, for March, you'll be seeing Ostara on the third weekend from all the other Hofs, and then the national event on the fourth. But yeah, I mean, Florida, it's a great time to go down and break away from all the cold. I would love to be down there right now. I'm buried in almost 6-7 inches of snow, which is super rare in this area. Again, everybody's there. Both like Founder McNallan and Sheila are coming.
Yeah,
that's
most
wild like that. Yeah, I mean, good stuff. I think anybody who has the ability to go out to national events should make the strives to do it, to get out there, whether you're group up with people, maybe if you're a member, look up in chat and see who's getting Airbnbs or local hotels or whatever you can, and definitely try to make it out. It's generally a process of like the first night getting there on Friday is relaxed, and you get to know people, and then you get pretty much hit right out the gate with a very powerful bloat to one of the ousts of our religion. And generally it's Lord Odin. It can be Lord Thor, especially at our Hof. And it's, chest rattling level of power going on there. And then the next day is, meeting folks, doing stuff with the kids, hanging out, having some discussions. I know like the ladies will do like a discussion group sometimes. And then we go into like storytelling and auctions. I mean, it's great. And then we do a very powerful bloat and then finish off with a sumble. And I think the sumble is unique. I know that you and I have been to so many sumbles, and each one of them kind of has that unique fingerprint of power to them as you get to hear other people's stories and hear about their ancestors. And then, Sunday is saying goodbye and going back into the world where, not everyone is Asatru, and it's kind of a wake-up call. But yeah, I really urge folks to try to reach out and do that and meet with some of the top people in the Asatru Folk Assembly, and ask questions and just get a feel for who we are. And the fact that we have them relatively close together with Charming of the Plow and then Ostra this year, if you're on the East Coast, definitely try to come out.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, a lot of the top people in the AFA will be there. I will also be there. No, but Alan's being there is a big deal.
This guy. Okay, wait. First off, since you did that, I don't know. I didn't mention it before, but you've been in the Asatru Folk Assembly longer than I have. I met you. You were a member, and I was like a brand new member at the Ostra in Georgia. I take it.
Yes. Yeah, it was down in Hampton. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the only thing was that you were younger then. You were so like I think that the church was still trying to figure out where you were at. And again, youth are generally I think a lot of people join and kind of flake out. I think this is a problem that we constantly face because people don't take our faith seriously. We do, and then they see that this religion that they just kind of want to express their edginess in is serious. So then they run away or they break off or they have some little grievance with someone. And but having 3 youth that joined and just you guys being serious, you in particular, and then cultivating, it's like gave me hope. Being an older guy, it was just like, wow, there are some young guys who really are serious and they're pushing it and they understand the seriousness of the plight of our people and our soul sickness. And so I think you sell yourself short when you say that you're not a key person. I think you've been around longer than me, and you've definitely gripped in and shown numerous times that you are here for the long haul. This is your faith.
Yeah, y'all are stuck with me. Yeah, no, I'm just making a joke. My point was, yeah, there's gonna be a lot of great people at Charming the Plow. It's a big deal that the McNallans will be there. They have not been to Njordshof yet, and this is the 4th year that we've had it. So, and it's the 30th anniversary of the AFA, and so they get to see where their legacy has come to so far.
I'm super excited for them to see the mural too.
Oh yeah, they're gonna love it. Steve's gonna stand there staring at it for 3 hours. We're gonna have to make him move to do ritual.
I put a lot of Easter eggs in there, so.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's gonna be asking everybody questions about it. Yeah, he's gonna love that. But couple more things before we start that I forgot to mention. Like I said, still getting used to this hosting thing. GW Farnsworth donated $25 to VNS. Once again, thank you, Mr. Farnsworth. You do this every week, and it's really, really appreciated. And it certainly adds up, and it goes a long way. And the generosity just means a lot, and it helps.
Nick, can you write down GW Farnsworth, if you have an address, could you please write that down? I'd like to send you something. If you could send it maybe to Nick or back channels, you don't have to do it on here. Okay, excellent. I'm gonna send. I gotta send something to you. Anyways, yeah, didn't mean to cut in there.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, the other thing I was going to mention, we are close, relatively speaking, to paying off Njordsoff. It was our most expensive Hoff by far. There's the graphics that'll help me speak correctly. We're about 3/4 of the way through. Let's see. Yeah, only 55,000 remaining. That's a lot, I know, in the grand, that 5-figure number there seems like a lot, but as it says on the screen, we've paid off 189,000 already. And once we get this paid off, we can start the quest for Freyshof, really, tie that down, make sure our monthly income is correct. All of the awesome folk builders and clergy in that area can start preparing to, be the stewards of their own Hof. And Njord's son will finally have a temple again for the first time in at least 1,000 years. So, let's see. I'm going to ask this question before we get started, just because it relates to Charming of the Plow.
Yeah. I'm going to use the restroom while you do so.
Okay. Folk builder Sarah Alt says, "Good evening, Witan Svan and Goði Trent. Lots of people traveled to our Hofs last weekend and will be attending Njordsoff this weekend for Charming the Plow. It's so wonderful to see. If unfortunately folk are unable to attend, what are some ways they could celebrate Charming the Plow at their own homes, whether as a family or solitary?" Well, it essentially, it kind of goes back to looking at the Holy Tide in relation to the Holy Tides around it. So before this was Thorabloat, and that was, we've just made it through the darkest part of the winter. It's time to, celebrate that we survived, essentially, and that we've made it into a new year. Ostara, which is next month, ahead of this one, is, spring is here. It's arrived. Things are warming up. Flora and fauna are coming back alive, reawakening. So Charming of the Plow is about essentially, pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps and kind of getting ready to get back to work during the warm times of the year. Our ancestors would kind of break the first ground to start planting crops. And of course, it's 2025, and our folk do a lot of amazing things. So thankfully, we do not all have to be farmers. Very few of us, in fact, and that's awesome. But we still like to celebrate and recognize how our ancestors used to live, and we can still take the mindset and the cultural ideas of those times and apply them to the here and now. As far as how I practice Charming the Plow, I actually learned how to do it from Witan Svan. So what I say and what he says are going to be similar, but I'll go ahead anyway. What we do is, and I always celebrate at Njordsoff, but I suppose if I were going to do it here at the house, what I would do is give bloat to Yngvi Frey, as he is the god of all green things, god of the world, Varaldagud, and ask him to bless our tools, because we do have a garden here at the house, so, bless our garden tools, our garden, and we would create the first furrow with one of those tools, and pour some of the blessed mead in there, and sort of probably do what you guys do at Thorshof and kind of write down a goal or something we want to have accomplished by or around Freyfaxi, and kind of bury that in the soil there. Witan Svan, what would you guys do to celebrate Charming the Plow at your home, or what could members do to celebrate that can't make it to a Hof this weekend?
I mean, exactly kind of what you were saying, and there is that consistency that we are starting to build in Asatru, where there would be some commonalities. And I think that one of the things that's unique to the Asatru Folk Assembly is the understanding about Charming the Plow being the starting of an arc. And in particular with Lord Frey, or I mean with the Holy Frey. Excuse me, I got to get out of saying the Lord Frey because that means the Lord. The Holy Frey. And I just wanted to expound on what you said there. Was just for people at home, this is that moment where the Lord is gathering the Alvar, and he is about to enter into the middle world. He's about to descend down, and what really, is required is the opening of the gates. Dellinger's Hall is barred shut. Ostara or Ostur, she will open up those gates and let that warmth in, and once she does, Frey and his retinue will come in and begin the processes of spring and all of that vegetative growth and all of that fedunctity of our animals and what have you. And I think it's important for people to realize that this is the beginning. The midpoint for this arc would be May Day. May Day is the culmination of this. The flowers are at full bloom. The bees are jumping in and out between them. So literally the birds and the bees kind of flitting and doing as they do. And then the final arc is Freyfaxi at the harvest time. And that's when the Holy Frey, bids his love, Gerður, who is here in the middle. He bids her adieu and he returns, and we have the symbolic leaving of the horse that he leaves her, that we eat. And this goes back to traditions of leaving the final sheaf of wheat in the field for John Barleycorn, which is kind of post-Christian. It is the Holy Frey. So this cycle is unique, and we have cycles within the years. Obviously, there's the major points in which we're looking at midsummer, we're looking at midwinter, and we're looking at Ostara when she opens the gates, and we're looking at winter nights when the gates close and the veil between the living and the dead grows so thin. But this kind of unique cycle is really, really important as far as it comes from our agrarian past. You said a lot of us aren't farmers anymore, and that's a good thing in the sense that our ancestors have struggled and claimed our ability to live different lives and not have to gruel away as serfs. But the agrarian nature of most of our holy tides is still super apparent. So if you were at home and you don't have a plow, I would say, digging a furrow with a small shovel. If you're in a place that's so cold that the ground is not relenting, utilizing a spike or something really heavy. Or you could just adapt by placing something in a potted plant that will be removed or be brought outside when it's warmer. But, when you focus on, there's like two things. One, if you're at home placing something in the furrow, a seed, as we call it at Thorshof, we write down something that we want to accomplish in the summertide. It's warmer. We have, it's the time we go out, we get the horizon. So if you have that seed, you write it down. And it can also be things that you want to let go of, things you want to conquer. It could be like, I want to stop doing this. So sometimes they can be very personal and very, very deep. Other times it's just, I want to expand my business. I want to buy a new property. I want to, buy a car for my daughter or whatever it might be. These little challenges, these little focused goals. And I always tell people, write them, fold the paper, write on top and bottom, and then put one in the ground and take the other one with you. But if you are at a Hoff, I plead, I beckon with you, please bring something from your work. Not enough people do this. And, Thorblot is about food and fun, but it's also about having your hammer blessed. And not enough folks, I think, were bringing their hammers. And then for Charming of the Plow, bring something of your work. If you wear a hard hat at work, if you have a stylus for a laptop or something small that you bring to work, but it's always kind of tied with you in your Orlaw, in your weird, bring it there and ask the Gothar to bless it. It's a unique thing that you don't get if you're doing stuff at home. But it's kind of the combination of the two. But if you, if you are at home holding a bloat, lighting your candles, ringing your bells, saying your prayers, blowing the horn, calling to the gods, calling to Lord Frey, calling to Gerður, who is an Austvanir, calling to Yarth of the earth, the good mother of the earth, as opposed to Gríður, who is the dangerous mother of the earth. But calling out to Yarth and placing in mead or bread, placing in loaves, making your own personal loaves, and then pouring mead upon them and then covering them in the ground, however you dig them in. But, you do this exchange. We always kind of, call the gods, announce to them what you're doing is in essence what we are. We're not calling them as if they don't have the ability to be around. They are gods. They can be around. But we're announcing what we're doing. And we're announcing that we're holding troth and we're holding tradition every year. And we want to be noticed. And then, you do an exchange of mead from your mouth and from your words into the horn. And you pour that into the flout bowl. And then you take that flout bowl, and when you dig that furrow and you place that bun or bread in, you pour that mead from the flout bowl into the furrow, into the bread. Place your, goal into the furrow and close it up, and then give thanks for the gods that have come to listen to you, to hear your proclamations. And then you follow through. And that's the real kind of nitty gritty of Charming of the Plow. We have the plow as a symbol of the ingenuity and the drive of our people. But it can be done with a trowel. It could be done by hand, or whatever else you might need.
Yeah, that does remind me, if you're coming to Njordshof this weekend, and I may have forgotten to announce it, or it's been a while since I did. Bring a tool of your trade, or come prepared to have your hands or your head or your heart blessed, or whatever. Like the Helgakviða wanted his heart blessed. Some people wanted their hands blessed because they work with their hands.
Right.
Things like that. One guy brought in this huge weed eater one time that was logistically a little tough to make work, but we did. The law speaker will be doing the bloat and the actual Charming of the Plow and the blessing of the tools. I believe he's doing the blessing of the tools as well this year, so that's going to be a great time. He's all of his rituals are very special. He puts a lot into them. We all do, but a a Lost Speaker Turnage ritual is just a very specific kind, and I hope you all get to be there and see it. With that, we'll hold off on the questions for a bit. We want to go ahead and start the Hundingsbana.
Yeah, let me give a kind of brief squaring up for folks that may have missed last, or so we're going to be doing it off of volospow.org, and these are Bellows translations. Again, this is interesting because the reoccurring character of Helgi, in this case, Helgi is reborn. And so Helgi and Svalva of the older poem are reborn into this poem. And it's specifically mentioned, but the big thing that I would say for folks who are listening to this is that we're going to, and we will pick it apart, is really good to look at. There are, poetic kennings, and there are really good things that kind of give us a glimpse into the cosmology of our ancestors, into the traditions of our ancestors, etc. That's why these are, the sagas and the heroes are really worth looking at, because they give us more of how our folk did things, and describe in fairly good detail. Excuse me. And I definitely want to expound on some stuff. I think that the other thing that's worth noting is the overarching concept of rebirth. I think reincarnation is a very important subject in relation to Asatru, because a lot of folks that are in, say, Eastern religions might think of a 1-for-1, that, you pass and then you return immediately. We do not believe that at all, that we are very much in the deficit of our ancestors, that they are there. And another thing is that there is not this sense that every time you're going to entirely be transferred over. Our ancestors see the parts of the soul as like a currency or a sense of boon that they can give their bloodlines, if they're allowed to give it at all. And so, sending up these boons to be born in your children, if you have a child that has traits from a good ancestor, and you start to see these things, or perhaps traits from an ancestor you don't even know about, but this is a good sign that they're carrying things that will elevate them, elevate your family, elevate you. If you see that the child is, again, carrying traits that are not good, sometimes that is the lot that the ancestors have kind of, perhaps sent your way, even for, deeds that might be unbecoming of the ancestors. You'll see sometimes that new souls that come about, are generally, those indicators aren't there, and the child's it's a blank slate, and it's really important upon the parents to make sure that the orlog that they imprint upon the new child, the new soul, will formulate them so much. So every single way of this is, crazy, or not crazy, but very, very, there's steep angles on it. We don't know. Once we pass through the mist of hell, the ancestors kind of, they have an advantage. They watch us, they see us, especially through the drippings of Mimir, but we don't have a look into them. So this is another big thing, is these souls cultivation. So let's say great heroes like Helgi. Helgi is brought forth again. Nidhogg, the corpse ripper, or the serpent of the lower realm, he's trying to rip that root, because that root draws up from Fjörgelmir. Fjörgelmir is the well in the bottom, and in the lowest world, where the ancestors are. They're farthest away. They're most protected from the onslaught upon heaven. So that root is so important for the drawing up of pieces of the soul, or the large part of the soul, in order to be brought back into the well of earth and entered into Orlog. So this process is complicated, and it is not clear cut. It's not defined. I'm sure I will understand it fully after I die, but not until then. We could be raised up to be Alvar. We could be raised up to be Disir. We could be raised up to live amongst the holy gods in heaven, and have that ascension. But we don't really kind of learn that until we go through the process of becoming unwhole by Hela's design, Hela's move, and then we take that road and we enter in with our ancestors, and then we get to understand this kind of secondary process of our, or possibly repeated. But I think that Lord Odin, in these cycles, is cultivating these glorious souls, the souls that truly aspire, the ones that you can see are above. They're cut in a different way. They gleam differently. They are, just perhaps not affected by time and the other things that confine us. And that's the souls that I think Lord Odin is really pulling into the heavenly realm. And these cycles are important to kind of cultivate that. Ever since the first breath of Ond, it has been a processes. And will we all get there? No. I was joking with producer Nick. I was like, I had my chance and I didn't get it. Speaking about going to the war, and I was very dead set on going to Valhalla. So I was in everything and on everything I could, get into, and it didn't happen. And instead, I gained a family and gained children. And I trust in the wisdom of Lord Odin more than my own inclinations to kind of be a edgy little youngin. But, again, we just have to understand that the processes is, it's figured out. It has its purposes, and hierarchy is a thing. And understanding our place in the world can be sometimes hurtful towards our desires and our pride, but you have to trust that the gods are doing as they do. So that was a very long rant about that. So again, that's an interesting point of this story, is the Helgi of the first poem that we talked about 2 weeks ago. This is a different Helgi, and it is mentioned in the beginning. And instead of Svalva as his love, he now meets Sigrun. And now there are connections to the Volsunga saga, or the Ringa Dernibelung. In essence, Helgi is connected in birth by Sigmund, Sigurd's father. So Sigurd the Dragon Slayer. Are these legitimate? We don't know. We don't know if this was a poem that was written in Denmark after and then was kind of put together, or if this poem, like the Volsunga saga is much older from the migration period, and it kind of evolved as it went. We just don't know. And there's a lot of debate, and there's certainly a lot of layers from that time in Denmark and so on. But, I find it super interesting because it talks about some nuances, even to the point where, say, Helgi is buried in a barrow as opposed to being burned. So there's very little interesting things in there to kind of see how our funerary practices changed depending on, where people were and what things were available to them. So that's why I recommend you sticking around and listening to this, because there's a lot of good stuff that kind of is very nuanced in there. All right, I guess we're gonna start as we start. Let's see. So, right out the gate, here begins the poem of Helgi Hundingsbana, and that of Hoðbrot. 1. In olden days, when eagles screamed and holy streams from heaven's crags fell, was Helgi then, the hero-hearted, Borghild's son in Browland. So right out the gate, for anybody that's, listening in at the VNS Cosmology and about the understanding that the way our ancestors saw cosmology was very, again, it's distinct. And I think that people kind of just lost way of it. The heavenly realm was seen as an upper world on top of mountains, on top of Himmelberger. And these mountains contained Ausgard, but they also contained other things like rivers, and there is a tree in the center. It's in the center of all things. So for a lot of folks that try to see Yggdrasil as some sort of cosmic tree, and at the end of every root is like a bubble, or if somebody, sees it as a tree that's, rooted in the ground or in the underground and has all the roots down there, but it spikes up through another ground, and then at the tippy top, that's where the gods live. I think they're deviating from the way our ancestors saw it. The heavenly mountains were surrounded by golden clouds. That's where the light elves, resided. And they were there, that the Bifrost could come down. That was a way for you to come in. Otherwise, you had to scale the mountains like Thor. When it's mentioned that he has to, go the long way around. What Ausgard, there isn't the entirety of heaven. Earth's well is there. Yggdrasil is there. The rivers around it. And the gods that took that place carved out a enclave for them to be protected, and then distributed the realms within the realm, if you will. And that's why the gods are spoken of as coming down and going into Jotunheim in the middle world, or coming over the world of men, or going into Vanaheim. So as we have evolved as a religion, we understand now that the upper realm, that's mythological language. The upper realm is still upper, still center, and Yggdrasil is there, and its roots descend. They connect into the middle realm or the lower realm, and the movement between those in the stories is really important. So I think this emphasizes it again. In the olden days, when the eagles screamed and the holy streams or rivers In the Asatru Folk Assembly, we teach the Gothar about the 11 rivers of heaven. There's 11 rivers in hell, or Helgakviða, or Niflheim, or Niflhel. We have a lot of different names for it. There are also 11 rivers in heaven that flow there, sacred rivers, amongst the gods. And all of their names are very, built around luck, or judgment, and war, kind of more, not theoretical, but their names, their meanings are kind of the opposite of Niflhel's rivers, which are, the crying out in pain, or the wound, the battle wound river, the cruel river. So you can see when you look at these names of Niflheim, you can see the ones that clearly stand out in heaven, and then the rest of them are in the middle world, sometimes separating us from Vanaheim or from Jotunheim. Anyways, sorry, I get into a cosmology rant because I think a lot of people have twisted and changed a lot of the way our ancestors saw this. So the poetic sense of this is that the eagles are screaming as, out there on heaven's mountains, where Odin's crag, Hlidskjalf, is, where he looks out upon the world. The eagles are screaming, and this is a hearkening to a hero being born, being brought back into the cycle in the middle. And it says in 2, 'twas night in the dwelling, and the Norns there came, who shaped the life of the lofty one. They bade him most famed of fighters all, and best of princes ever be.
So in these,
yeah, good.
I was gonna say, in sources like this in the Havamal, when they say princes, that does include, princes how we mean it now, but it also just means, sons of nobility, or nobility themselves, like a brave warrior, if he was of noble stock, could be called a prince. I forget which Havamal stanza it is, maybe 51. It's the one about a prince's son should be joyous and generous, etc. I'm not good at quoting the Havamal, but
yeah, well, because there's 2 of them. There's one that's he should be joyful even upon his death.
Yes,
smiling. And then there's another one that says trust not your sons until they've erected a monument to their name. You never know how they're going to turn out. So I always get those 2 confused sometimes.
But yeah, that one is it doesn't necessarily mean the heir of the heir to the throne of some kingdom. It means a good noble man's sons. So just something to keep in mind.
The name for it here is kind of not the same. You'll see it in Anglo-Saxon, the word that they'll use for prince or warrior, they kind of interchange them, is atheling. And I think a lot of people don't know that. The translator just tries to use what perhaps would best fit or create alliterative points. But I was just going to say in here, I wanted to look up. And the other thing is, I really like to look up stuff because I'm never at the position where I want to say that I'm 100% correct, especially in relation to Old Norse, because there are so many linguistical variants. And so when you have someone just saying hey, this is what it means, I remember someone was translating the name of the it was Vitnir, the river that goes around Valhall, and there is like Vitnir Thjóð, and they translated that to mean Heimdall, which again it's a really crazy jump because it means like wolf people. And I really, that's the moment when I realized like it's super important that we focus on making sure that we check and we double check before we say anything, because that was just like a wild thing to say. And I had always been taught that around the halls of Valhall, there were Ulfidnar or Berserker or, the wild warriors, the children or the people of the wolf. And it says, in there in Grimnismal that they patrol around the hall, again, to portray that a very safe and security is high. But for somebody to say, oh, no, that means Heimdallr, was like, what? So at that point, it made me really begin to question people's translations and also my own. But I do believe that the word in here, if anybody has the computer, is Othlingi. And I am like trying to find it. That's the other part, is I never know exactly what I'm going to have to look up for the night. So I have my notes, but then something like this will creep up. I just wanted to check really quick, and I really hate to leave, dead air. Or I don't know, maybe Nick could look up Othlingi for me real quick, or anyone in the audience too.
I've got a question we can answer real quick that's fairly short. And I'm going to skip past some of the earlier ones just because this one's easier to answer. Sorry, guys. DRB87 says, hey, just started learning about this stuff. Which translation do y'all recommend? Also, what books should a newcomer read? Please and thanks. As far as translations, a lot of people really like the Hollander. I do too. The Bellows is what we're using for this specific thing, and I enjoy Bellows' stuff. Thorpe is pretty okay on a lot of the stuff. Jackson Crawford, I don't like him as a person because he thinks Asatru is silly but wants to be, this authority on it. So that's douchebaggery at its height, in my opinion, and I wouldn't recommend his translation. Not that I think there's anything academically wrong with it, but he views the lore and all of this work as kind of it's just a study for him. It's just a research project. So that being said,
we could fix him.
Yeah, I can fix him. As far as stuff a newcomer should read, I've got two that I recommend that are like bare bones, just starting out. The first is called Asatru, A Native European Spirituality, by our founder, Stephen McNallen. It's pretty easy to find. It somehow has not been removed from Amazon or anything. The second one, and this one's, it's a large tome and it's very dry, but it is a great read and it's very, very important, is Culture of the Teutons by Wilhelm Grönbeck, volumes 1 and 2. And it comes in one book, but it's just always titled volumes 1 and 2. And I recommend buying the Antelope Hill Publishing version because the Alsheragothi did the foreword for that. And the other version you'll find in print online is done by a different pagan group that doesn't like us for some reason. There's a third book I'd recommend. I just remembered. Germania, or Germania, if you want to anglicize it, by Tacitus. That's a really, really fun read. And it's Tacitus was a Roman writer that was just writing down what he knew of the Germans or Germanic people in the broad sense. It probably included some Celtic people in there as well because the lines were so blurred. But if you are of Northern or Central European or even some parts of Eastern or Western European ancestry, anything but Roman or Greek, basically. He was writing about your ancestors in there. Lots of cool stuff. He listed our strengths and weaknesses as he saw them, and there's, bias, of course. He kind of had this noble, savage outlook about us, but that's fine. It's still a great read. It's very telling. You can kind of see some earlier Asatru things in there. It's where a lot of people get the whole wrong-headed attitude that the gods should only be worshipped outdoors. But that's where they get that from, and that may have been true at the time, but Asatru is a living faith, and it evolves. And we have Hoffs, and we're going to have many, many, many Hoffs.
Yeah, or even just the physical. I think that Tacitus was saying that, we make our gods in like human form, and the Germanics don't, but clearly we do, and even clearly by the Nordic Viking age, they were also doing that. So, I think that was more of a jab towards Rome.
He had this. A lot of it was too. Yeah, he was complaining about Rome and being like, "Oh, we need to get back to nature, return to tradition, like our German cousins up north."
Yeah, and especially when it came to marital stuff, he said that the Germanic people only feel the need to have one wife, and they looked down upon people who had sexual inclinations that were outside of normality. If they were sleeping with animals or sleeping with the same sex, they were punished severely. They also talked about divorce and stuff like that. That's a great book. Yeah.
I reread it like every 6 months. I love it. The Alls Helgakviða would want me to point out too that the way they punished things like gross sexual deviance or homosexuality was, rather than making a show of punishing it, they would hide it away. They would stomp the person into a bog. They would treat it the same way they treated cowardice. It was on that same level for them. It was shameful for the whole tribe. It wasn't like if you committed a murder and refused to pay the man price. It was gross and disgusting, and they just wanted to make you go away. But we got off on a tangent there.
Oh, no, I was going to add to, I was going to say, if I had number 1, number 2, number 3 of translations, I'm right there with you. Hollander. And then, to be honest, I prefer Thorpe over Bellows. But the Asatru Folk Assembly encourages anybody who's reading the Eddas to get multiple versions. You can find them online. So, before you invest in paying for a book, except for Hollander, get Hollander. No, you can actually read the verses across each other, specifically with like major poems like the Volaspau or the Halvamaul, that you can kind of get an idea as to which translations you prefer. Thorpe's straightforward. Bellows is very, kind of old English, King James, not old English, Middle English, King James, biblical kind of speech. And Hollander is a little bit more modern, but holds to all of the poetics, if you will. And I was going to say, as far as, faith goes, there is a lot of books out there that you may find, but you have to be very, very careful. And if you find books that are stating that, the gods have, desperate political positions, if they are, I know that like one group was trying to say that one of the Ausinjur is the goddess of homosexual marriage. When you see those little things, those should be warning bells kind of popping off, letting you know, like, oh, I don't know. But I was going to say, for me, the Book of Troth by Edred Thorson is it was there. It was one of the first kind of books bringing forward Asatru. It explains a lot of the structure of the bloat. It explains a lot of the reasoning. The older ones are kind of hard to find, but there was a reprint. It was the book that brought me into Asatru when I was 13 years old. There was no internet. I came across it at an old bookstore, and it made me understand that this faith is, more than people just pretending, or the fact that it's been so erased from our history. So I really recommend that one too, because it goes over hallowing spaces and the purpose of transference between the horn to the bowl and giving gift out. I think those are really kind of key little mechanics that are worth knowing.
It looks like producer Nick got us that word you were looking for.
I did.
Oh,
so you were right on your idea of it being related to Athling. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, so they have the Nordic version of Atheling amongst the Anglo-Saxons. There's Aðlingur, is a person of gentle disposition, or of high disposition, or someone who is
specifically, it's somebody who possesses odor,
inspiration. Yeah. I think that a lot of folks too. I just noticed here in the comments that Edred's bloat is a bit outdated. Yeah, I think that we have evolved from that. I think there were elements that perhaps were included, and I think that most of the Asatru folk assemblies bloats don't follow that one for one, but it's worth as what it was doing at its time, and kind of the basic blueprints I think are very interesting, and I think worth looking at, especially for me. I'm biased. I took the oath. He had a prayer kind of ceremony in there where the reverse of what Charlemagne was doing. Charlemagne had a prayer saying, you need to leave these gods. You need to, leave the, spirits of the Nordic or the Germanic folk, and accept, Christ and the angels. And Edred did a reverse one where he said, no, I relinquish Elohim or Yahweh. I relinquish the Rabbi Yeshua, and I claim now the gods of my folk. And I did that when I was 14, and it has changed me. Like I have not since, bringing about that in my faith is that was the turning point. As far as the hammer hallowing goes, there are numerous points about, the directions, the four directions, whether we are talking about the dwarves or we're talking about the Jarl who holds the horn up and says, I will expand my kingdom to the north, to the east, to the south, and to the west. I know that a lot of folks try to skirt away from it because they feel like it's kind of mimicking Wicca and the watchtowers. But there is at least the validity that the idea of pressing your might into the four corners is a kind of poetic language. And the hallowing itself, though, blessing things and giving whether it's sprinkling, which is kind of what he focused on, but aspergement and blessing things with the hammer, with the swastika or the fifot, I think is pretty solid as far as I think that's a development that has relatively good placement when people talk about like over the horn, they did the hammer of Thor. I don't think that they were doing an upside down T. I think they were doing the fifot, and that fifot is that dynamic power of Lord Thor. But we see that where they are blessing and hallowing objects and what have you. But again, I understand too why Wicca has a bad taste and everyone wants to push away from it. And I certainly think that, like, even at the Asatru Folk Assembly, we don't really do that, but instead have the hallowing of space by smoke. And when we're outside, perhaps we do the four directions or what have you. But to say that it's just like a Wiccan thing, I think that's misplaced. And hallowing anything in the name of Thor is, if that seems also out, I don't think that is correct with many of the references that we have towards blessing items, blessing objects and people, places with the hammer of Thor. The question was always, what is the hammer of Thor? What does it look like? What does it mean? And I have always taken that to really lend towards the fifot. But yeah. So okay, let's move more in. So here we have mightily wove they the web of fate. Again, we see reference towards Orlog being a lattice, while Brauland's towns were trembling all, and there the golden threads they wove, and in the moon's hall fast they made them. So another good point there is the golden threads. There isn't a lot of references made towards copper threads, but there is a lot of references made towards, because I remember somebody along in early days of Asatru saying, like, your fate is kind of golden web, silver web, copper web, and that's the kind of lot of your life. But the idea that golden webs were wove for your fate, for your as a hero. So it's mentioned here that this is unique, that this is going to be Helgi. East and west, the ends they hid. Again, showing direction. And also, too, east and west being specifically connected to the birth and the death of a person. So they weave this golden thread and hide the ends in the east and the west. And we, again, see this directionalness portrayed in so many of the stories. The validity of this usage of wording and the point of it is clear. And this does it right here. So the east and west, the ends they hid, and in the middle a hero should have his land, and Neri's kinswoman northward cast a chain and bade it firm ever to be. Once sorrow had the eveling son. The Evelings, or the Ilfings, are most likely the wolflings of Beowulf. And we spoke about them a little bit on the last show. Once sorrow had the eveling son, and grief the bride, who the loved one had born. And we lose here some of the translation. Quoth raven to raven on treetop resting, seeking for food. So now there is a birth, and the story is set, and it eventually draws us down over the land, over the house where Helgi is born, and then back out into the land, and right upon two trees, we see ravens, and they speak. There is something I know. In mail coat stands the son of Sigmund, a half day old. Now day is here. His eyes flash sharp as the heroes are. He is friend of the wolves, full glad are we. So he speaks now and says that not even a half day old, he has donned the mail coat. Really what this is that he has the mantle of warrior. He has been, the mantle of warrior is placed upon him because he is the son of Sigmund, who is also the father of Sigurd. And he is only a half day old, and his eyes are sharp, and he is going to grow up and be a mighty hero. And he is the friend of wolves. He will feed them, and he will also feed the ravens. The warriors throng, a ruler thought him. Good times, they said, mankind should see. The king himself from battle press came to give the prince a leek full proud. So this here comes from the tradition at birth. And I, often did it. I did this with all my children, was the washing of the child with a leek, to, take out of the child and brush that child clean by placing salt upon their head and washing it off. But the Asatru folk assembly focuses a little bit more on the Nornir, which we saw in the first part here. But, if anybody had ever seen those photographs of my children's naming ceremonies, there was a leek involved. And that's where this kind of comes from. As kind of, in essence, this is his time of being named and gaining his station in the community. And Helgi, he named him, and Hringstathir gave him Solfall, Sun Mountain, Snæfell, Snow Mountain, and Sigurðsvoll. Hringstath Hotim, Himinvangur, and a blood snake bedecked to Sinfjolti's brother. So he is given in title to land and or kingdoms, if you will, or places, landmarks, the Sun Mountain. And so it's kind of explaining the vastness of his domain that he inherits by being born this warrior prince. Mighty he grew in the midst of his friends, the fair-born elm in fortune's glow. So another good point to kind of go out with here is that the ash and the elm tree in relation to humans, it's clearly utilized by both, but it was not gendered per se. It was not that all elms had to be a woman and all ashes had to be a man, especially in poetics. Ash could be utilized for, everyone. And in this case here, he's referred to as an elm. I think that some people get confused with that. And I've also heard people try to twist and push that agenda. which I don't think it's correct, especially with poetics. The idea of the usage of a tree has been part of the poetics for a long while. Sometimes it wasn't even an ash or an elm. Sometimes it could be a yew tree. And so this case here, people will find this one little nugget and say, oh, that shows that, this person was transgender or what have you. And I think that you should be very, very careful about people who link into one tiny thing to try to make the man bites dog story into the large of reality. So let's see. To his comrades gold he gladly gave. The hero spared not the blood-flecked horde, the riches gained by war. Short time for war the chieftain waited. When 15 winters old he was, Hunding he slew, the hardy wight. Again, that usage there, the hardy white being not a color, but a spirit or the spirit of someone, who long had ruled over the lands of men. So at 15 years old, which isn't so far out of the realm if a lot of people understand, that our ancestors' life expectancies were sometimes in the 50s. And by the time you were 15 years old, you might be getting a boat and expected to go or join a crew and go and fight overseas. And, marriage didn't follow that much, after. So the time scale might throw people off now. But 11, of Sigmund's son, then next they sought hoard and rings, the sons of Hunding. They bade the prince requital pay for booty stolen and father slain. So now at 15 years old, Helgi slays Hunding, and his sons come forth and say that you must pay the weregild against slaying. And another reason why this lends towards the possibility that these poems are from the migration period is because of, the slaying of kings or chieftains, especially during the Nordic period, was not generally met with asking for weregild. The king didn't need to ask for weregild. Instead, there was generally a slew of men, sons and retainers, who would seek vengeance. And I think that this is one of those cases where it shows that this might be even further back in the migration periods and kind of the relationships between the different tribes. The prince let not their prayers avail, nor gold for the dead did the kinsmen get. Waiting, he said, was a mighty storm of lances gray and Odin's grimness. So he says, no, there is, I will not give you any money. I will not give you any recompense for the slaying of your father, because there is a mighty storm. There is a storm of battle coming, and Odin will be watching as he knows what's coming. And the warriors forth to battle went. The field they chose. Lowafall, Fjall, the waterfall mountain, or the water mountain, the river mountain. Frothe's peace midst foes they broke. Through the isle went hungrily Vidrir's hounds. So at this point, war is unleashed between these groups, and the peace. Now you could, Frodi has often been talked about as being a physical king of Sweden, and here this is supposed to take place in Denmark. But you could also kind of look at it as, again, this frithful peace between the groups by the Holy Frey has been broken, and now war is released. Odin's hounds are battles as they go through and ravage the land. The king then sat when he had slain Eyjolf and Alf. These are the sons of Hunding. Neath the eagle stone, Hjorvarth and Hovarth, Hunding's sons, the kin of the spear wielder, all had been killed. So now he's not stopping with Hunding, and he's killing all the sons as well. And in a way, they would be obliged, or not even obliged, they would be 100% obligated to avenge their father. And he fights through each of them, and gaining victory over them. Then glittered light from Loafjord, and from the light the flashes leaped. High under helms on heaven's field, their bairnies, their armor, their chainmail armor, with blood were red, and from their spears sparks flew forth. So now coming from Logafjord is the Valkyries. And Valkyries is an interesting subject when we talk about the older poems versus the late Nordic and even slightly post-Christian conversion, as Valkyries were kind of seen as, whether you would say demigods or having the ability to live amongst the folk, to be seen, to be captured, or betrothed. Seeing the Valkyrier in the middle world in the hero sagas is not uncommon. And it is a huge drive for the hero, the sacred feminine. The question again is are these real people or are they divine? I have a tendency to believe that they are divine, but the structure of the story needs to be, still kept within the realm. Otherwise, you lose a lot of the conflict. But I love how it's said here that their chainmail is flecked with blood, as they are the spirits of battle. They are the extension of Lord Odin's will and manifest his, personal Nornir, weaving Orlog at such a distinct moment in battles. And then with 16, early then in Wolfwood asked the mighty king of the southern maid, if with the hero home would she come that night the weapons clashed. So he asks her if she is betrothed to anyone, and would she, come with him. Down from her horse sprang Holgni's daughter. The shields were still, and spake to the hero, other tasks are ours, methinks, than drinking beer with the breaker of rings. So you might read this as a an insult, and I've often wondered if it was, but sometimes when they had gold armbands, they would break pieces off of it and give it to their followers. And this was kind of seen as a generous act, someone who simply gives you gold for giving them loyalty. A ring giver, so a ring breaker. Unless, this is referral to the killing of Hunding. But at this point, I think it's more a compliment because of the level of badassery that Helgi is doing at this point. He is a hero that, wets his sword and continues to fight. But the other interesting thing here was I wanted to see was about the referencing of Hogni being a actual person. It's not a special name for Lord Odin. And these connections between the Volsunga saga are starting to still kind of play here. Helgi runs into a Valkyrie, and Sigurd runs into a Valkyrie. So this was a very, very common thing. Let me see. Yeah, that would be, he was just, there's in the notes down below, the Valkyries were essentially Norse as any part of the older mythos. I doubt if a poet much earlier than the author of First King Helgi would have made his Sigrun daughter of Hogni. So we see the element of the Valkyria, and this also, again, if these stories go further back than the Viking age, where the Valkyries added in, were these women and then the title was added on, or was the Valkyria a concept further in to Central Europe, and that it wasn't seen as like a layering on? But she has she is betrothed, and she says, "No, I can't, spend time with you. I am betrothed to another." Helgi speaks in 21, "Messenger sent the mighty one then, by land and by sea, a host to seek, store of wealth of the waters gleam, and men to summon, and sons of men." Again, to that little kenning of waters gleam, gold and amber. I think that gold has that kenning of waters gleam or gifting of the waters because of amber, and that perhaps, there was the trade with the Romans from the Baltic areas that was so important far in the past, and that it became synonymous with wealth and with beauty and power. And that is why amber and gold are both, associated with the Holy Freya. But in this case, gold is, I think, the primary reference. And he bid them straight away in 22, seek the ships, and off Branday ready to be. There the chief waited till thither, where come men by hundreds from Hethinsea, which, Haven say you in the Old Norse. Again, sometimes the words that are translated into English get a little wild. Soon off of Stavsness stood the ships, fair they gilded, and gay with gold. Then Helgi spake to Hjorleif, asking, "Hast thou counted the gallant host?" The young king answered, the other then. Long were it to tell from Tronnoyr, the long-stemmed ships with warriors laden that come from without into Arversund. There are hundreds, 12 of trusty men, but in Houghton lies the host of the king, greater by half. I have hope of the battle. So he says that they're now preparing for battle outside of, Tronneiri. And see these linguistics here, I'm, trying to figure out exactly where they are. And I'm wondering if these are referencing to the Danish islands in between Zealand and Denmark. But here they have, this gathering of folk, and the idea that, because he says there are hundreds, 12. I don't know if this is 12, 100 groups, or if this is, 112. But there's a large band as they prepare, and they feel like there's a chance. There's a good chance to win. And Helgi speaks, the ship's tents soon the chieftain struck and waked the throng of warriors all. The heroes the red of dawn beheld, and all on the masts the gallant men made fast the sails in Varensfjord. And when you say ship tents, remember too, like a lot of times when they would go up on the beaches, they would drop their mast and turn it and bring it out like a tent. So a ship's tent is, again, a way that they would utilize the long ships for shelter. And in this case, I guess that would also lend to the fact that the battle would be on land as opposed to the sea. But they win, and then they set off again. There was a beat of oars and a clash of iron. Oh, actually, no. So they land, set camp, rest, reset up, and then meet out in the water. There was a beat of oars and a clash of iron, and shields smote shield. As the ship's folk rode, swiftly went the warriors laden, fleet of the ruler, forth from the land. So did it sound when together the sisters of Kolga struck, with the keels full long, as if cliffs were broken with the beating surf. The sisters of Kolga being analogous to waves. And I'm very interested to look. Actually, I'm going to write that down. I do not believe that any of the daughters of Raun are Kolga. So where does that reference come from? So the waves are striking the keel full long, as if cliffs were broken with the beating surf. And Helgi bade higher hoist the sails, nor did the ship's folk shun the waves, though dreadfully did Aegir's daughters seek the steeds of the sea to sink. So I really, Nick, can you pull up the 9 daughters of Aegir? Is Kolga, or is that just the way it's translated that's throwing me off? For anybody they're really laying in the poetics, the way that you would think, these folk are Asatru, and they're speaking about the primordial lord of the ocean. They're speaking about the Jotun that the gods have made they've made an oath with. They've made a deal. They have taken the primordial ocean and brought it under their dominion, but not, in the way that they have with others. They have not done it through marriage of the divine. They have not done it through offspring. And in this case, Ayr's waves, his daughters, are kind of grasping at the ship and ready to pull them down. And we see more references of understanding about the fear of Ayr and Raun. Again, for folks that might not have the computer in front of them, I see a lot of folks say Aegir, but it's pronounced Ayr. And Ayr is kind of akin to, perhaps with the Hellenistic, it would be like the difference between Neptune or Poseidon, Lord of Waters and storms, and then like Oceanus. Ayr is the Lord that progenerates the Jotun kind of essence of the ocean. That the ocean is still primordial. It still contains things from far back when Ymir was alive. And so the gods bringing them under yoke, and especially in relation to the cauldron, is very, very important. And but we see here, these waves are just ripping, and Helgi bade higher hoist the sails, nor did the ship's folk shun the waves. Though dreadfully did Ayr's daughters seek the steeds of the sea to sink, steeds being the boats. But from above did Sigrun brave aid the men, and all their faring mightily came. From the claws of Raun, the leader's sea beast, off Nipalund. Nipa meaning like kind of a rise, a lift or a hillock, a hilly place. So outside of there, Sigrun comes to aid. And this is where I wonder if they are speaking about her flying above the fight, which would again make the layering of moving away from a mortal woman to a Valkyrie, but blurring those lines. And Helgi spake, at evening there in Unavaugr floated the fleet bedecked full fair. But they who saw from Svarin's hill, bitter at heart, the hoist beheld. Then Gothmund asked, goodly of birth, who is the monarch who guides the host? And to the land the warriors leads. Sinfjolti answered, and up on an oar raised a shield all red with golden rim. A sea sentry was he, skilled to speak, and in words with princes well to strive. Say tonight, when you feed the swine and send your bitches to seek their swill, that out of the east have the Ylvings come, greedy for battle, to Nipalund. So now there's this exchange going across, clearly insulting that the Ylvings or the Wolflings have come. And this is another reason why the building of the Danish peninsula, the Danes fought out the Wolflings. They broke them and eventually, pushed them out. But in here they're speaking of these battles as being not necessarily there's kind of an honor amongst your enemies, if you will, that they were not some easy pushover. They were clearly a hard-won fight between the Danes, or the starting of what would eventually be the Danes and the Ylvings. And so this story, I think, speaks of Helgi and them being of these, great renowned tribes. There will be Hothbrod, Helgi find, in the midst of the fleet, and flight he scorns. Often has he the eagles gorged. Wilt thou at the cairn where slave girls kissing? So he basically says that they're awaiting for Helgi will be Hothbrod, and he has gorged eagles with the corpses of the dead, and there will be many for them to fight. So this reference here about the Jotuns, or the slave girls at the grinding stone, let me see. I wonder if this is directly a reference to that story. He basically says, that Hothbrod has fed eagles while, you were at the grinding stone, kissing slave girls, or it's kissing the help, kissing the work, while he was, you were just but a babe trying to figure out girls, and he was fighting battles. And then Gothmund retorts, "Hero the ancient, sayings heed, and bring not lies to the nobly born. Thou hast eaten the entrails of wolves, and of thy brothers the slayer been. Oft wounds to suck thy cold mouth sought, and loathed in rocky dens did lurk." So here we see this exchange between, as we go back standing, it is Sinfjotli. Sinfjotli is now speaking forth to Gothmund, and he's speaking in kind of not representation, but he is able to answer back, and he speaks back to Gothmund saying, and then Gothmund retorts. So these are kind of more or less poetic insults, and you'll always see one that is hugely thrown is that you are the slayer of your brothers. That is another reason why kinslaying and, being labeled a needling, that is the highest one, killing your own kin, because it was thrown around so much, with such disdain. So he says, you were living like in the woods like a wolf and eating. You were a cannibal, and you slayed your brothers. And Sinfjotli speaks, and I will say this is kind of a foreshadowing a little bit. But Sinfjotli speaks, "A witch in Varin's isle thou waste, a woman false and lies didst fashion. Of the mail-clad heroes thou wouldst have, nor no other thou saidst, save Sinfjotli only." So they're exchanging, these barbs back and forth. And there's a couple of thoughts about this one where he's saying that you slept with a woman that had a child out of wedlock. or, you know, with an unknown father. Some people have read it as that it was not a woman at all, but a woman dressed, or a man dressed as a woman. I don't fully know. I think that most likely, I'm just to be safe, I think that they're referring to a woman who has a child without a husband or without a father. And that was kind of, you know, the insult, though, or it also could mean too that he's saying like a woman that was not yet a woman. So these are clearly insults. These are seen as negative things and are not being supported in that range. So, you know, going with a woman that, you know, the father, you know, left of or is of ill repute, going with obviously a man that dresses as a woman or a woman that is too young. These are all considered kind of insults. And so, you know, he's really jabbing. And also called her a witch, called her, you know, like they interchanging with the idea that she's a temptress or a seeress of, in the translation, they use the word vulva, but, you know, kind of this evil doer, this worker of magics. In 38, a Valkyrie wast thou, loathly witch, evil and base in all father's home. The warriors all must ever fight, women subtle for the sake of thee. Nine did we in Sauguns of the wolf cubs have. I their father was. Gothmund spoke. Though older thou art than all I know, for thy gelded thee in Nipalund, the giant women at Thorsness once. And Gothmund speaks in return. Under the houses the stepson of Sigurd lay, Fane of the wolf's cry, out in the woods. Evil came then all to thy hands, when thy brothers' breasts thou did redden. So you slayed your brothers. Fame didst thou win for foulest of deeds. Sinfulty speaks. In Brauval wast thou, Grani's bride, golden bitted and ready to gallop. I rode thee many a mile and down didst sink, thou giantess under the saddle. So you know, and Alcir really has spoken about that too, where the mastery over of the animal. And so the idea of saying, you know, that I mastered, I tamed the horse, I tamed, and you can't, you know, really fight against that. And that's I think a more interesting way of putting it, considering Gothmund is just throwing really, really, you know, venomous attacks. And he continues on. He says, a brainless fellow didst seem to be. So, yeah, a brainless fellow dost seem to be, when once for Golnir goats didst milk, and another time, when as Imps' daughter in rags thou wentest, wilt longer wrangle? So here, and again, this is an interesting, that they're referencing stories and accounts and poems, and most likely that Imps' daughter is a Jotuness, and that he's basically saying that you're sleeping with troll witches, you know, wrangling them, living on the edges, being a a person in between the world of men and the world of the Jotuns, and yeah, so he's kind of throwing these out there that you were destitute and you were sleeping with giantesses. It's yeah, Gothman's insults are pretty brutal. Sinfjolti spoke. Sooner would I at Frekastein feed the ravens with the flesh of thine, than send your bitches to seek their swill, or feed the swine. May the fiends take you. So he's like, I cannot wait to kill you at Frekastein. I will feed the ravens your flesh. Helgi speaks. Better Sinfjolti thee twould beseem, battle to give and eagles to gladden, than vain and empty words to utter, though ring breakers oft in speech do wrangle. So here in this case, Sinfjolti kind of steps up as the word of his king of Helgi. And Helgi even states, that when it comes to poetic battling, it's not always the case of every lord or king. And he says, though, by the end of the day, what do battles of words truly mean when we can simply just prove it? And they are vain and empty. Helgi speaks in 46. Good I find not the sons of Gramnar, but for heroes 'tis seemly the truth to speak. At Moinsheimer proved the men that hearts for the wielding of swords they had. So his army is well tested. His opponents are well tested. And it's already been proven in the battles before. Mightily then they had made to run Sviputh and Svegjuth to Solheimer. By dewy dales and chasms dark, Mist's horse shook. Where the men went by, the king they found at his courtyard gate, and told him the foeman fierce was come. So, and I think that's an interesting, when we see Mist's horse. I'm looking, this might be the Dokvar Hlíðar. Again, this is early morning is what he's making reference to. In early morning, they are coming. The horse of Mist, most likely Hrimfaxi, who is the goddess Night's horse. Forth stood Hothbroth, helmed for battle, watched the riding of his warriors. Why are the Niflungs white with fear? Now, this is an interesting part, because the Niflungs are in reference to the Nibelungs, if anybody's familiar with the Ring of the Nibelungs. And the origin of the Nibel name might be, again, referencing to Mist. But, he asks, why are they retreating, or why are they shaking? Why are they not ready? And Gothman spake, swift keels lie hard by the land. Mast ring hearts and mighty yards, wealth of shields and well-planed oars. The king's fair host, the Ilvings haughty, 15 bands to land have fared, but out in Son are 7,000. So Guthmund returns and is telling his king who's coming and what time they'll be here. They're going to be here by dawn. They're going to be here when the mist on the ground is still here. And he kind of asks, like, why are you returning? Why are you so shaken up by this? And he basically says that there's, the king of the Ilfings, who is Helgi, represented by Sinfjolti, have 15 bands of men, but in the water, out in the fleet, there is 7,000 men. And he says again, at anchor lying off Nipalund are fire beasts black, all fitted with gold. There wait most of the foeman's men, nor will Helgi long the battle delay. Now, that one is interesting because the usage of fire beasts, dragons, connects to ships directly. So, at anchor lying off Nipalund are ships. They're pitch black, they're painted black, and they're all fitted with gold. And there they wait, and they won't wait long. So the battle is coming. Let me see here. And now I'm having a brief issue with trying to go forward. All right. So then Hothbrod spake, bid the horses run to Reyenthing, Melnir and Milnir to Mirkwood now, and Sporvitter to Sparren's Heath. Let no man seek henceforth to sit, who the flame of wounds knows well to wield. So gather your men, go everywhere, pull everyone, bring them here. Let no man who's able to fight be spared from your summons. And he says, summon Hogni, the sons of Ring, Atli. We talked about that in the last episode about Atli either being a name that was brought about because of the wars with Attila, and then there was also the thought that these stories are older and that this is referring to Attila the Hun. But he also said, and Yngvi and Alf the Old, glad they are of battle ever. Against the Volsungs, let us go. Swift as a storm, there smote together the flashing blades at Frekkastein. Ever was Helgi Hunding's slayer, first in the throng where the warriors fought, fierce in battle, slow to fly or to retreat. Hard the heart of the hero was. From heaven there came the maiden's helm. So now the Valkyries come down. Weapons clang and grew who watched over the king, and spoke Sigrun fair. The wound givers flew. The arrows were flying. And the horse of the giantess Raven's food had. So the reference there of the horse of the giantess is Death, is Hel's horse. In reference to her, she is of the Jotuns. And again, we spoke about the Jotuns coming into alignment with the holy gods through different means, whether it's by oath or by marriage or by childbirth. And the reference of the horse of Hel kind of coming in, and some, the speculation of Hel's horse with the 3 legs. But here it's just clearly that, death rolls in and ravens begin their feast. Hail to thee, hero, full happy with men, offspring of Yngvi, shalt ever live, for thou the fearless foe hast slain, who to many the dread of the death had brought. Warrior well for thyself has won, red rings bright, and the noble bride. Both now, warrior thine shall be, Hogni's daughter, and Hringstaðr. Wealth and triumph, the battle wanes. So this is the end of the poem, but in essence, Helgi loses the battle. And that's what brings about the third story in which he's brought back again. And Hogni's bride will be, taken upon Hrothbrod. So it's more or less a very short poem that has a ton of kennings, and it alludes to a lot of different things, but then throws in a lot of geographical content that we have a disadvantage of knowing exactly where they're at, and a lot of folks debate as to exactly where these places are, and it emphasizes kind of the battling between the clans of these areas and how they fought each other by land and by sea. And it also has a lot of poetic flex in the way that they're speaking of, the flashing blades and the giantess's horse, or the dragons, the fire dragons being ships. There was a lot of kenning work in this poem, but then it ends. And again, I was going to say the descent of the children of Yngvi. Yngvi is generally is Lord Frey, or the Holy Frey, that they're descendants. So this too, meaning that they are that the Swedes were brought into this as well, which I thought was very, very interesting. Actually, I think one of the notes covers it. That Yngvi, one of the sons of Halfdan the Old and traditional ancestor of the Ynglings, with whom the Ylvings seem to have been confused. So sometimes people would take the Ylvings or the Wolflings and confuse them with the Ynglings. The confusion between the two and the Volsungs was carried far enough so that Sigurd himself is once called a descendant of Yngvi, even though that's relegated more towards the Swedes. So, and that's that's the end here. As we move towards questions, I guess. Do we have questions going on here? And
yeah, we have a few. One cool thing I wanted to point out. So you mentioned that the Ylvings or Ulvings are probably the Wolfings of I forget the Wolfings.
Yeah, Wolfling of Beowulf.
Right. Yeah. So those are also the Wolfings or Woofings of East Anglia in England, where my people come from. And I bring that up because a question we get a lot is someone will say, well, I'm English, or I'm North German, or I'm Dutch, or I'm Lowland Scottish, I'm not Scandinavian, so I can't worship the Aesir. So first of all, the Aesir are Aryan gods. We just use the Norse names for them. Second, those groups I listed are all genetically Scandinavian. So on a genetic level, and this is something that was uncovered like 6 years ago, like it's fairly old news. But when you compare an Anglo-Saxon, like fresh off the boat Anglo-Saxon, to a Danish Viking from a few hundred years later, geneticists cannot tell a difference. They are the same thing. They are cousins. Their language was roughly mutually intelligible. It's kind of like having to read Bellows' translation of any of our work was about the language difference. So, yeah, and then that Wolfing connection shows that these were Scandinavians that moved into England, and lowland Scotland, a little bit in Highland Scotland, into what's now Holland, the Netherlands, into northern Germany and further down south. The Angles and Saxons specifically are just Danes that picked a different tribal name and moved into Jutland or Saxony in Germany, So something to keep in mind there.
Yeah, and again, too, ultimately, I think that whether it's Gaulish or Germanic, when we look at the Aryan gods, we see them constructed similarly. We see the tripartite, whether it's the Gauls, and they have, Teratatis, Tyrannus, and Essus, or we have, Lord Odin, Thor, and Tyr, and then they have, like in the East, with the Slavs, they have Svarog, Perun, and Veles. Cultures are different. The languages are slightly different or drastically different, but the structure there, you can see it's still the same.
Yeah, for sure. So one question I've been eyeing is, this is a guy I know. His name is Tyler. He says, "Hey there, I'm a non-member of the AFA at the moment for personal reasons, but I do love the AFA and what y'all are doing. I wanted to send a question in for the show either tonight or whenever y'all get around to it. What's the best way to introduce family members or friends to Asatru without overwhelming them, particularly those who may have some bad preconceptions about it? Thanks, and keep doing what you're doing." The best way to introduce family and friends to it without overwhelming them is just to live it. Make it such a non-negotiable part of your life that they have no choice but to deal with it. That's what I did, and other than some issues with Antifa 6-ish years ago, it went fine. My family, they're all either liberal or they're conservative and folkish, but like Baptists, and they're all fine with me at this point, as long as they don't see Svan speaking Icelandic at my wedding and then get scared off. They're good otherwise. Yeah, that's what I would recommend, is you just have to live it, and you need to live it proudly. Say these things with your chest, live a noble life, which the guy that sent that question in, I know he already is, but I would encourage him to join the AFA and be open about it, and just be patient with your family. You will need to be patient with them, and they love you. They'll eventually accept it, or at least shut up about it. What do you think, Witan Svan?
I would say, so like, you gotta hold firm, like you said. Occasionally, though, you might meet someone in the throng of your family that is at least willing to talk to you about it. And two things that I would say you focus on is the similarities. Most of the people in your family, even though they're Christians, they're European Christians. So you can find commonality there. When you talk about Ostra and Easter, when you talk about Yule and Christmas, they can see the commonalities with the Yule tree and the Yule log, and the Ostra eggs and all of that. You can find the commonality. Again, even too, like the days of the week, we bring that up quite often. It's teaching people that, our faith was so permeated that even after the Christianization, these elements remained. The other I would say is, so finding that commonality. When they see weddings, I don't know if you're getting married, but definitely get married in your faith. When I see people who are not Asatru in our families, it really opens their eyes when they come to a wedding or when they come to like a baby naming. I had mentioned that earlier. All of my children were named at home because we didn't have Hoffs yet. And there was a lot of people there that were not just Asatru. It wasn't Asatru exclusive. I invited a lot of people from my family life, my work life, because I'm not afraid. Our faith is our faith, and when you try to hide it, sometimes it makes it seem like you're doing something wrong. So I had folk over, I had non-folk over. I have non-folk friends that and coworkers, so they came over, and we had a big meal, and then we fastened the name to my children, whichever one, because I did this 3 times, and everyone after was like, "Wow, this is, I feel like this is normal, this is right, or this is good, or this is reminds me of something." They some of them felt like it was drawing something out of them from the old. Others were saying that they understood it, and they didn't think that they would. So exposing your family members perhaps to certain things is not always bad. Perfect example, I think that a lot of the Reconstructionist types might kind of, lift their nose at this. But we have a food prayer that we do. And we do this, and we've had folks come over who are Christian, and they respectfully go through the food prayer with us. They, and they listen to what we're saying. One of the biggest things that you can find is alliedship in your family through commonality. It's, again, the reason why we say church, the word church, and why it burns up a lot of people is because they just got all this anger and aggression against it. But when I say to my, like a client, "Hey, I'm going to my church this weekend," they understand. But if I go to the hall of, the great, thunder crusher of the Jotuns, I mean, they're going to be like, "What?" They don't get it. So definitely search for areas of commonality is what I'm getting at.
All right. Next question is from Folk Builder Sierra Chapman from Odenshof, who will be at Charming the Plow at Njordshof this weekend. So I get to see her in about 24 hours. I'm very excited. She's awesome. We're excited to have her there. She says, "How excited are you for Charming? Go the East. Will you be joining us in our gator excursion?"
When you answer that, I'm going to use the restroom real quick. Okay.
Cool. As far as the gator excursion, maybe it'll depend on the money situation and time. I just started a new training routine, kind of a modified version of what Mike Menser started. If anybody is curious, nobody's curious. I'm just talking. But I need to make sure to get to the gym on Sunday, so it'll depend on if I'm able to still get to the gym after the gator excursion thing. Am I excited for Charming the Plow? Yes. So I'll tell a little story just to kill time and to give people a story about my personal life, I guess. The second to last time I was allowed to lead bloat at Thorshof before we got Njordshof, and keep in mind that at this time the whole East Coast, the whole Southeast, including Georgia, of course, was part of Thorshof District, and I went through the whole Gothar program while I was at Thorshof. The second to last bloat I was allowed to do there was for Charming the Plow, and we charmed the plow, and Witan Svan dug the first furrow in the ground behind Thorshof with the blessed plow, and we each had to put in a goal of ours, right? And mine was for my wife to get pregnant and for us to be able to have a child. So, that was 3 years ago now, because that would have been 2022. And of course, we went through a couple losses in those 2 years up to that point. But now she's 32 weeks on Friday. Everything's going well. The doctors keep talking about, how ridiculously healthy the baby is and whatnot. So it took a few years, but that goal that I wanted achieved at that Charming the Plow 3 years ago is finally, coming to fruition. Those seeds of victory that I, talk about were planted. Not to be gross, I guess, but
No, that's
Um,
cool. I didn't, because we don't usually talk about what we
right.
put in the furrow. So that's cool.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, yeah, it all came full circle, and so now, we're having her baby shower at the event during the men's and women's groups, and so it feels very full circle, and it's kind of rambling. The long story short is I'm just very, very blessed, and I look forward to just sharing this event with you guys and seeing various friends of mine that I haven't gotten to see in a while. Like I haven't seen the Ericksons since Sigerbloat, and that was just Githia Katie because she was there to help me cover for the All's Helgakviða. I haven't seen Witan Erickson, and I guess it's the last Ostara. Yeah, I'm very excited to answer the question.
Just Nick brought up something too about that question. Kolga, and in it for the 9 daughters of Ayir, and again the beings of water generally have 9 daughters. Njord has 9 daughters. Ayir has 9 daughters. But yeah, I always thought it was like Kloga with the L in front of the O. And that I just very interesting that he, but also kind of fun fact, my mother is named after one of the daughters of Raun. Her name is Bauda, which means like a crushing wave. And I mean, she could yell the paint off a house, but yeah. So anyways, I wanted to point that out. That mistake there was clarified by Nick.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. My mother is not named after any of those, but she could also be crushing at times. Let's see. Next and last question so far. Ryan Orion Votonson says, question, Trent. I found a Trent East channel of a guy playing guitar through glass. Looks like you. How long ago was that? I would love to say that's not me, but yeah, that's me. That was 8 or 9 years ago. I don't think I was even an apprentice folk builder yet. I certainly had not started dating Madison yet because you meet a pretty girl and everything else kind of goes out the window, including playing guitar and singing, thankfully, because I was not good at the singing part. Yeah, I used to write music and play a little bit, and around that time I had kind of gotten the hang of playing and singing at the same time. My singing voice is garbage, but I had the skills, like the technicalities of it down, and I was pretty excited about it. So yeah, that is me from a bajillion years ago, to answer your question.
I just saw something come in here on by Jackson Red. He's saying, reading Jung and Nietzsche goes a long way with a deeper understanding of pagan thought. I would also add on there too. I mean, all knowledge is good knowledge, and different times in your life you'll find the usages of those writings. But two of them, Tyr, Tyr, named after the Lord Tyr. There is a series of books, volume 1, volume 2, volume 3. I believe it goes up to volume 4 now. And I haven't quite got that one. That series of books is really good on also getting a deeper understanding. And when you say, pagan thought, I know what you're referring to is that kind of clearing of a lot of our less desirable things that we have gained from, being inundated into like a Semitic faith. And also too, on Being a Pagan by Elaine Benoit.
Yeah.
I'm almost positive that's yes, it's called On Being a Pagan by Elaine, ALAIN DE Benoist is how it's spelled, but you know how French is another interesting book. So the Tears book series is really, really good. Particularly volume 1, I think, is fantastic. It's a lesser known one. I think it's one that people kind of forget about, and it's the one where Stephen Flowers, who is Edric Thorson, brings up the purpose of folkish faith. And I think a lot of people have a tendency to tuck that away. It's, again, very worth looking into. Yeah.
Okay, we don't have any other questions at the moment, so I'm going to take a second to once again plug the event this weekend, Charming the Plow at Njordsoft. Yep, there's that link, kind of. Well, you can click it and you can navigate the site till you find it. If you're on MeWe, it should be the featured or pinned post in the Moots and Meetups group. And if you are, for whatever reason, listening to this as you're already racing down to the Hof, that's fine. Do not attempt to order tickets on your phone while you're driving. That's dangerous. Instead, wait till you get to the Hof, and we'll square up with you there. Yeah, we made sure to purchase food for more than how many are currently attending. We always overestimate by a bit. Feel free to bring auction items. Feel free to bring money to buy auction items. Children are welcome, of course. Bring your family, whatever.
Is Gil is gonna be there, right?
Gilbert?
Yeah. The wood craftsman, the one that makes amazing Hlout bowls. He carved a godstead of Thor.
Yeah, that's my kinsman, Gilbert Page. Yes,
yeah,
he will be there. Yeah, I believe he is sharing an Airbnb with myself and Gothi Mayo, so I'll see him pretty soon.
Yeah, I was gonna say, for people who, as far as auctions go, like if you're looking for a Hlout bowl if from an Asatru who's well established in the community and just a great guy, definitely seek some of his stuff out. It is amazing what he does. His wood shaping, it blows my mind. He made the Icelandic replica of Thor sitting with the beard hammer for me as well.
Oh wow.
So yeah, it was unbelievable stuff.
Yeah, he has this thing where he's like, oh man, I'm so tired from working on this one and only one thing. And we're like, oh, okay, that's awesome, Gilbert. Then he'll come to an event and have like 36 things. And we're like, what? Where did these come from? Yeah, he's a great guy. You get to meet him and talk to him if you show up to the event. And that is always a good time. We did have one more question come in from Bobby Milhauser. How do you deal with it when it does get bad with your friends or family, or how did you handle it personally?
In relation to our faith.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I assume that's what you're talking about. You can correct me if that's not it, but I'm pretty sure that's what you're talking about. Essentially, I just kind of had to stand firm. Yeah. And like Witan Svan said too, and I should have thought to say this myself. Yeah, but some of my family members would, if they heard that I was folkish and that's, evil, meanie racism or whatever, they'd sit down with me and be like, well, how do you actually feel about all this? And I would tell them, that I am proud to be white, as they should be proud to be white. And black people should be proud to be black. Asian people should be proud to be Asian, etc. It's the natural setting for mankind. We all have in-group preference, and anybody who's worked in schools or the corrections system or the military or anything will see that, has seen that play out, is essentially the point I made. And I still to this day have black friends. I was joking with one of them because he was asking about the docs a while back, and he was like, okay, well, if you're allowed to be proud to be white, can I be proud to be black? And I was like, yeah, it's encouraged. And he was like, all right, cool, but I don't want my kids marrying your kids. Is that cool too? And I was like, yes. And that's normal.
Right.
That's how it's always been. It's not like an insult or whatever. Yeah, and Jackson Red said, I don't trust anyone that isn't proud of themselves and their people. That's a good rule of thumb. Keep in mind, too, though, with white people specifically, we have that soul sickness that the Altair Gothi and our founder, Stephen McNally, have spoken about. It's not necessarily an untrustworthiness in them always. It can be, for sure. But a lot of times it's just that sickness manifesting itself. Because I used to be like that. I was raised by, 90s Democrats. And so it happens and you just have to break out of it. And all of our folk are capable of breaking out of it. It's just you have to want to kind of, or be forced to. What do you think about all that, Witan Svan?
Well, and I think it's interesting because we come from kind of the different sides. You spoke about the folkishness that really, and again, you started out at young and folkish right out the gate. I really didn't. I came out from a religious angle that when I introduced it to my family, I immediately got hit from more of a religious angle. My brother had converted to a really thumping Christian church, and he tried to convince my mother that this was not good, and you have to take him to church and so on and so forth. And then my grandmother passed away in Iceland, and so we flew up to Iceland, and my brother and I were on the same plane, and we were already very cool with each other as far as we didn't really, it was cold, if you will. And I got a chance to meet Jormungur Ingi, who was the Allsherjargoði of the Asatru Fellið then. So I went there to meet him as a secondary thing. And my brother, at the same time, did a secondary thing where he went or was trying to start some church in Iceland. And I think that was the tipping point. We had went out the night before, got a little, sauced before the funeral. And he told me that he was doing that. And I just suddenly felt this kind of overwhelming sense. I'm coming here trying to recultivate the faith of our people. And you're coming here bringing this, another wave of Christianity. The Icelanders have already been through Catholicism. They didn't like it. They are already been through Lutheranism. And now you're bringing, whatever this, I don't even know if his was, but I was just knifing at him, it's your mega church, strip mall Christianity. And I was like, that's not what we need. And no matter how many iterations of the lie you try to sell, and it was brutal in this little pub in Reykjavik. And he was pretty upset at me. It was an awkward flight home. Sometimes those things need to happen, but at the same time, is it worth the loss of your family members? I don't think it is. So I would say be ready to just simply defend your faith. And remember that most people, if they're Christians in your family that don't like your faith, it's because of their faith. Their faith tells them that their God is of unconditional love, but if they don't follow these conditions, they're going to burn. There's a caveat, and there is the whole, your leg is broken from birth with original sin, but I've got the crutch. So there's a lot of flaws on their faith that you can point out, but don't go to the point where you are burning bridges. I think that you should take a calm and composed sense. Do the opposite of what I did. I got all fiery hot. Instead, simply just point out this, our faith has been around for thousands of years before Christianity came to Europe, and Christianity was only around for a few hundred years before it moved into Europe. It wasn't there in the Middle East. That you have a perfect, point and validity. They might ask you like, oh, what's going to happen if I, don't believe in your gods? It's like, well, first off, my gods have never stated that you're going to get, chewed up in a wood chipper if you don't worship them. And that we all return to our ancestors unless you do something that the gods and the ancestors warrant to make you a needling. Other than that, you can be confused all you want in your life about the gods, about divinity, but at the end, you and I will have this discussion later, and I will be telling you I told you so. So go with it with some poise. If ever you need a talking points, bullet points, I would say reach out to your Gothar and ask them about talking points that you could bring up in order to defend your faith, and with the hopes of resolution, not just nuking the whole thing. Because I would not recommend that.
Strip mall Christianity is great. I will be taking that one. I've been trying to come up with a term for that. It's real big in the outer Atlanta area here that I'm in. There's, in my specific small town, there's lots of normal kind of down to earth Christians who are, we can call them folkish to an extent, I guess. They're good people, but yeah, you get closer to the cities and these worshiping Jeebus at an old rundown Ford dealership, kind of stuff going on. And I think Madison was calling it like car dealership Christianity or something, but strip mall is a bit more compact. So I'm going to use that. Gothi Mayo asks, gentlemen, can both of you speak about where you see the church in another 30 years? How many hops by then? Gothi Mayo is another one of the people you will be able to see if you attend Charming the Plow at Njordshof, which you should do. 30 years, I'm going to say 10 hops, 10 more hops, not 10 total. So 14 total. So at that point, we will have gotten the way the Altair Gothi currently has it laid out. If we were to have 14 hops, we would have 12 of the Aesir listed in the Gylfaginning, as well as Allmother Frigg and Holy Freya. And I don't know what's after that. I would assume it would be various brides of the Aesir, or possibly the Maidens of Fensaler. I'm going off on a tangent.
No, I would argue too that if we could have the Hof of the Holy Frigg and have the Maidens of Fensaler, have the Hof dedicated to the Holy Freya, and then maybe groves dedicated to the Austvanir.
Yeah,
with outdoor shrines or what have you. But I don't think you're wrong. I don't think you're off the mark there.
I figured it'd be one of those options. Surely we're going to continue to honor the Alcinor after we get through the 12 Aesir. As far as in general where the AFA will be in 30 years, I think we talked about this the last time Spawn and I did an episode together, but it's always a fun topic. I think we'll have a lot more members, a lot more folk builders, a lot more Gothar. I would assume the Witan will be expanded a little bit, not much, a little bit, if at all. I like to think we would have like monasteries or academies, I guess, whichever sounds less corporate, for our Gothar students, where they can sit and study the program. That's almost the experience kinda that Witan Young, Gothi Stam, and I had at Thorshof, because we were all ordained at the same time, went through the program together under Witan Svan here at Thorshof, and we didn't live there, and pray to Asatru daily at his mural or anything cool like that. But we were there every month for the pretty much, putting in work and bugging Svan for opportunities to do stuff. So, again, I went on a tangent, but
that would be cool.
The Hoff on Mars thing, I don't know if that'll happen in 30 years, but surely in 100, right? Elon's working on stuff. I think some of those 10 Hoffs would have accrued by then, will be in other countries. One in Sweden would be great. One in maybe in Germany and England by then as well would be cool. One in Ireland would be neat. But yeah, that's roughly my vision of 30 years from now, I suppose. What do you think, Witan Svan?
I'm right there with you. I think that the Hoffs dedicated to the Aus, and that would just be like putting it over the top with having the Hoffs towards Holy Frigg and Holy Freya. And I think that would be great, because a lot of folks don't realize, we in the AFA realize that it sucks that, you come into the faith and it's like, okay, there's a Hoff like right down the street from me, right? And oftentimes that's not the case. I mean, I live almost 5 hours away from Thorshof and go there twice a month, and bring all of my kids and back and forth. You have to make these are the times, because there was a time when there were no Hoffs. So I'm hoping one day, at least with the 12, we can have epicenters. And if we could get something like what you were saying, like perhaps just a place at Sigerheim where every Gothar student could come there for, say, a week in the summer and conduct all of the things they need to conduct while being held, by their hand, maybe under the tutelage of Asatru, or, you know what I mean? Like, that would be a very cool thing. And it would be like, not so much a monastic life for years, but, a summer, or start off with just a couple of weeks, getting people to kind of have a chance to break away and just live Asatru, and help out around Sigerheim, and, do physical labor, do mental labor, and spiritual labor. I think too, the plans, and I spoke about this before, about getting a college set up, would be super important. But I'm kind of right along with you on the Hoffs and membership, getting people to start changing the way they see Asatru. Asatru is not a faith that you just get to kind of covet because it makes you feel cool, but that we have a real problem that the more that our folk are conditioned and bent, and really their minds have been messed with by the Semitic faith, we need to bring people home. That's huge. And so, reaching out across the table to people and saying, hey, you should come and join me for bloat. You should come to our Hoff and at least see what we do before you cast a judgment on us. And I think that you'll be more surprised to find a lot of people going, wow, I don't feel like this is what I had in my head, that I had these because it's in their blood and it will stir them up. Again, the biggest thing that we're fighting against is damnation. The idea that has been just burrowed in their head is that if they don't follow the rules, if they go away, if they step off the plantation, if they jump the fence, they're going to be burned, etc., etc. So we have to fight against that, and that's one of the biggest things. And I think that alone is worth trying to save people, to kind of free them from the prison within themselves. And the relationship of, again, if you don't honor me completely, that's what you get. That's not good. So
Right.
that would lead us towards more folk, is having Asatru folk, like, again, it's not proselytizing. It's not about spreading the faith. It's about like saving your folk, kind of removing the veils off their heads. In essence, when the Christians came into Europe, they felt that they were saving these, European souls. And, you might find a lot of these Christian kind of historians saying like, oh, it was so terrible before, and we were just so much better, and it was the love of Jesus. That we clearly know that's not the case. We clearly know that everything that's kind of sold versus kind of the reality. So we should, I think, have the same vigor of wanting to have that veil removed off of our people's heads. And, they are okay with us being, conservative or liberal Christian, et cetera, et cetera. They are terrified of us waking up to our folk faith. They are absolutely terrified. And I think that I think it should be incumbent upon us to seek out and remove, and we should have it in the same gusto that the Christians came in and kind of assaulted on Europe, and just systematically with usury and battles and bribery and weddings, etc. Now, I'm not saying we go that far at all, but what I am saying is that we should be willing to step up and press forward and say, no, in actuality, you're the one that's, you've been taught that anything outside of this tiny little Middle Eastern Semitic bubble is, demons and evil. And if you don't kowtow, you're going to get punished. And, your soul and the expression of who you are is bent on this kind of proselytization, or not, but prostration, this kind of bowing, when reality, we are a people of heroes. We are a people of glory, and we should be pushing for that, and not, chains around our neck. Sorry, I soapboxed on that one.
That's a worthy one to soapbox on.
I almost felt like we were
Milhauser.
on X listening to one of his conversations with somebody else.
Yeah, I have a tendency to be pretty brutal. And again, it's not just Christianity. I would argue against Islam. Islam wants, us to have our heads off. I would argue to certain sense of Judaism. I know that some of Judaism is folkish, but there are other points in which, they're the reformed and, the kind of encouragement of other religions, the encouragement of Christianity in a way. It has all of its own problems. So I would like to say that for the record, because I know that a lot of like leftists will pick on Christianity, but won't against anything else. And it's because it's just that falseness. They're actually anti-white, and they view Christianity as being white, and that's why they're attacking that specifically. So
that's what I always say. Yeah, these people on Twitter or wherever that are like, oh my God, the West is taken over by anti-Christian people. No, they're just fine with the Christians in Africa or Asia or the Middle East. Well, Africa and Asia, not so much the ones near their Holy Land, but yeah, no, they're just anti-white. They're anti-Western civilization in the truest sense, which is white people culture, white culture. Bobby Milhauser kind of rephrased his question and said, how do you deal with your friend or family's rejection of you, I guess, when it does get bad? How did you overcome it? That one, and the answer will be largely the same, but for me, and I want to preface this by saying the whole forgiveness, turn the other cheek thing is not a moral requirement for us like it is in Christianity. But you do pick your own battles, and of course there are going to be, situations where you'll choose to forgive or not forgive someone, and sometimes it's reasonable, sometimes it's unreasonable, right? But it is your choice. So in 2019, when I got doxxed for political stuff, but then people also got mad at me for AFA stuff, I didn't necessarily cut off any of my family, but because they're part of that kin fence, they are my blood, they are my family. And I told them, like, hey, I'm not going anywhere. You are the ones who are choosing to leave me behind. I'll be here. I will not move, but I'll be here if you choose to return, essentially. And I know, from their point of view, is probably the other way around. But that's how you need to be, is strong like an oak, stand your ground. I would encourage you, depending on how those family or friends acted, to be willing to consider forgiving them, depending on what happened, of course, and that's up to you. But yeah, that's how I would handle that and how I've overcome it in the past.
I would think it's also super important for you, not you, Trent, but like for the questioner, to remember that you are on the correct path. I think that a lot of times, because of the delusions of Abrahamic faiths that they are in mentally, that you begin to like, oh, am I crazy? What's going on? No, remember, they're on the crazy path. You are on the path of sensibility, where your blood is, where your people are, and even to the point where, again, all of that stuff could not be washed away. So it had to be laminated over. But in Matthew 10, verse 34 to 36, there is a point where the rabbi Yeshua says, "Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword." And I know that like the based internet deuce vault Christians like to like tout that, but they don't talk about the other half. And I'm bringing it up because it pertains to your question, because it says, I'm not here to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and one's foes will be members of one's own household. So that is stating that their intentions are to cause this breakup, this destabilization. What it really reminds me of is like when the like left-wing people get all crazy during Thanksgiving and they're like, I'm gonna preach the word at my Thanksgiving just to rouse up my family that isn't aware about marginalized people, etc. I'm not going to talk about marginalized people in other countries, like in China or in African countries. I'm going to talk about here because that's where it only matters. So you see this kind of like call to break apart. It is a Jotun mindset to dissolve and to soak up the bits and pieces. So the person that takes it badly is the one at fault. You are speaking of your faith, right? And I assume if they're taking it super badly, then their religious fervor comes from, say, perhaps that they are extremely religious in the belief. And they're worried for your soul and they think you're going to be punished. And again, remember, you're dealing with the cult member. You're dealing with the one off. You're dealing with the one where, in the very words of their book, they're saying, take your sword and go and carve up the legiancies that you have in your family. You're not the problem. So once you get that in your head, like, okay, wait, no, I'm not the problem. These people are built in a like this cult crazy mindset. The biggest thing I would say is, there's nothing that there's nothing that you can do to assuage them. There's nothing that you can do to make them think differently. They, in essence, the code word on that one is they're so buried deep in the cultishness that you can't unprogram them. But you can say simply, I am living my faith. I will not hate you. And I will continue to do it as I'm doing. And if you ever change your mind, if you ever kind of evolve from this, whatever this is, I will be here. And I have had so many friends who have, from politics to religion, etc., they have all kind of chased like dogs chasing cars. They're back and forth and up and down. And a few of them, not all of them, I really wish it was more, but a few of them have noticed, no, like Svan has maintained. He's, been of this faith. A lot of the guys in the military even noticed it, like, yeah, oh, you're still doing all that Viking religion stuff, I've maintained. I have, I have a wonderful house with a wonderful family in it. So my house is filled with love and joy. All of these, a successful business, all of these things that I think that people that just hate on other religions are like, why isn't Yahweh punishing him, et cetera, et cetera. And then I've even had somebody say, oh, the reason why you're not being punished is because Satan and his demons are helping you out. And I'm like, okay, it's one way or the other. But again, you're dealing with lunacy. You're dealing with aberrant thought. So you can't make it make sense. You just need to know that if they decide to cut their ties with you, you should leave that open. You should say, hey, I can't make you agree. I can't fix. I think that, if you ever change your mind, you can always come back and we can start again, because the oath between you is in blood. And again, for us, oaths they're organic sometimes when it comes to the way that we deal with each other. I don't think that even if they say something terrible, I don't think that you should be like, completely cut it off, because if you do that, you'll never allow people to evolve. They could have a whole thing where they go to these churches, they realize they're not getting anywhere. It's strange and there's a lot of drama and what have you. And then they come back to you and they're like, you know what? I'm a little interested as to, you've been Asatru for so long. What's it about? And the whole thing turns over.
Yeah, I liked your bit there about, we're actually the normal ones, and the Christians don't view it that way, obviously, but we're the normal ones. Something to consider, too, and I'll kind of relate this to Gothi stuff, kind of just so everybody has an idea of the mental picture of it. So when a Gothi or Githia performs bloat, the idea of it is we're supposed to be building a bridge, laying the foundation of a bridge to walk and connect with the Aesir. And through the AFA and modern Asatru and its reforging, what Founder McNallen and that kind of older generation, the more recent Haligmen that have Days of Remembrance and stuff, Elsie Christensen, Alexander Red Mills, etc., what they did was they laid the bricks of the bridge for early Asatru, or the reforging of Asatru. And, you know, these Christians may have seen the bricks being laid for a bridge off in the distance and it didn't bother them, but now they see their own people, their own kin walking across it. Our generation right now, we're walking on those bricks that were laid by Stephen McNallen or Law Speaker Turnage, etc. Hopefully he doesn't hear this and get mad that I called him old, but that older generation, you know, they did that for us. Now that we're walking across it, it's being noticed. And yeah, just as Witan Svan said, keep in mind, we're the normal ones, right? You look at pictures of our gatherings and stuff, it's all normal people. We have, you know, we have anywhere from kids to Allen-aged people. We have men and women, and only men and women, no made-up genders. We have skinny people. We have less than skinny people, or more than skinny, I guess. You get the picture. We're the normal ones. This is our faith. It's our birthright, as Whitney Erickson has famously said. So, yeah, I wish there was some answer to your question that was kind of a cure-all or anything, but there's really not. You just have to stand your ground and remind yourself that you're on the right side of things. And just so you don't feel alone, I suppose, all of us, every single one of us has been where you're at to some degree. Many of us are still there. Many of us have gotten through it. Most of us have gotten through it or are through it or whatever. So, yeah, it's not a situation unique to you. You are not alone. And if this is ever bothering you, feel free to email the Gothar, or hell, you can text me. My number is 678-901-2040. I think Antifa already put my phone number on the internet a few years back, so won't hurt to put it on YouTube. But yeah, reach out if you ever need to talk about this stuff one-on-one as well, because I know it can be heavy. So
I wanted to say too, I've used this a couple times. I just forgot the numbers of the verse, but in Matthew 10, verse 14, because again, a lot of these mega church, strip mall churches, they have pushed the proselytization, and I've always kind of hit him with Matthew 10:14, which is basically where the rabbi tells his disciples as they go into these villages, if no one wants to hear your words, if no one wants to welcome, the gospel. And it's historically interesting because this is basically a small cult within Judaism. And these guys believe that, there's this living Mashiach or Messiah, and they're trying to convert other Jews. And he says, though, if you go in there and they don't take the word that I'm spreading, then have them dust off the dirt or dust of your feet and move on. It's basically I don't want to hear it. I know you feel super inclined to preach to me, but at the end of the day, I think it's just best that you wipe the dust off your sandals. So yeah.
Bubblegum_man. Cool name. Do you agree with Oswald Spangler's take that Christianity set the cultural framework for Marxism and progressivism? Yes. So that was the transvestite ideology of its day when it hit Europe and it hit Rome and all that. It spread through slaves, the Jewish people, because Christianity is just Judaism to Electric Boogaloo. It spread through slaves, Jewish people, and women, right? And then, of course, from there, through greed, as we've spoken about on here before. So yeah, I have not read much of Spengler's work. If he was the one that wrote about the sort of idea that every era is defined by one great man, I read some stuff about that, but I haven't read his works directly. But he's right in that assessment. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a book, I believe, called The Dark Awakening that talks about the dawning of Christianity in the Roman Empire. It's certainly, and we get taught when we're kids, like the what is it? I forgot it now. The Lion's Den. They were throwing Christians in the stuff, but they never talk about what the Christians were doing. And that book explains a lot about how they were politically and religiously destroying the infrastructure of Rome. And then when you meet guys online that are like, oh, well, Christianity united Europe and did this, well, most of the knights, and even like during the Viking Age, they converted to Christianity for money. They converted to Christianity for lands. They had no idea about Christianity. They were still fighting with European spirit. So that organization, that kind of deuce vault mindset that a lot of those guys have is really sad, because they're in essence riding on the coattails of European heroism, and they were just organized with money and pointed to go to the Middle East. And they did, and it siphoned out so many, men from Europe. So, again, the concept is, no, they're the strange ones. They're the ones off. They're the ones that you got to kind of contend with, because they're in their own crazy little headspace. And once you realize that, then it's best for you to be the adult. It's best for you to kind of not burn the bridge, but realize you can't, break them of their conditioning. It's just not going to happen. At least with them, you don't have to worry about particularly violent reprisals like you do with other Abrahamic faiths, like with Islam. So,
yeah. Anytime a Christian or Christians online or wherever say that we're the strange ones, just remind them that circumcision exists. There you go.
Oh yeah, or if they talk about how, like when I've brought up that Christianity has slowly degraded European like identity, European culture, and they'll say no, it expounded it, and then I'll say no, circumcision, perfect example. It didn't happen right away, but it eventually happened, and there were knights, there were like Christian zealots that were looking for the foreskin of Jesus. If that doesn't like send off alarm bells that this is not in your cultural wheelhouse, I don't know what it is. The search for the holy prepuce is what it's called. That's a wild rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah, look into that. I think the Helgakviða has discussed circumcision here too, and just because we're on it, I guess, and to fill time. So I have a son on the way. We've already decided we're not doing that. I'm not gonna bring, this kid into the world who's supposed to be my favorite person. Everybody like, all right, buddy, we're chopping a piece of you off, 2 days after he's born.
Right. Remember to substitute for child sacrifice,
Yeah.
I don't want your son, but I'll just take a piece,
Yeah, no. And for anybody wondering, I've researched it because I'm, as I've mentioned before, I'm a skeptic in literally everything but the Asatru and the AFA. I looked into the whole circumcision thing. It is not necessary. It's just not. Wouldn't recommend doing it. Your choice, of course. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. With that, we don't have any more?
I was going to say thank you, Bobby Milhauser, for your kind words.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad this, this has been able to touch people and kind of get, reach people. That's excellent. I'm glad people take something from it. And we're here every week. Not we specifically. Spawn is every other week. But
yeah, I mean, VNS is here.
Yeah, yes. With that, guys, I'm going to try and get some sleep so I can make the drive to Njordhof tomorrow morning. I hope to see as many of you as possible there. And if I don't see you there, I hope to see you at Ostara at Thorshof in exactly 1 month. All right. So, hail the Aesir, hail the folk, hail the Asatru Folk Assembly. And remember, victory never sleeps. Night, y'all.
Good night, everyone.